Hey everyone, have you ever had that feeling like something huge, something life-changing is just around the corner? Like the air is charged with possibility and you're standing on the edge of something extraordinary? That's what we're diving into today. This isn't just a story, it's a movement. It's about Holy Spirit power, the kind of power that ignites hearts, transforms lives, and shakes the very foundations of the world. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around because by the end of this, you might just see the world and your role in it completely differently. So let's set the stage. If you've ever read about the early church in the Bible, you know that when the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost, it wasn't subtle, it wasn't quiet. It was like a rushing wind, tongues of fire, and an explosion of transformation. Ordinary people suddenly had extraordinary power. They spoke in languages they'd never learned, healed the sick, cast out demons, and boldly proclaimed the truth no matter the cost. But here's the question: was that power meant only for them? Or is it still alive, still available, still waiting to pour out on us today? Before we answer that, let's talk about the latter rain. You might have heard this term before. It comes from the Bible, in books like Joel and James, where it talks about early and latter rains. The early rain was needed to plant the seeds, and the latter rain came to bring the harvest. Spiritually, the early rain represents the outpouring of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, and the latter rain, well, that's what we're waiting for now, a final, unstoppable outpouring of God's Spirit before the end of the age. Now, here's where it gets exciting. We're not just talking about a little drizzle of blessing. No, the Bible describes it as an overwhelming flood of Holy Spirit power. And this isn't just for pastors or missionaries. This is for you. Yes, you watching this right now. But let's pause and reflect for a second. If the Holy Spirit is about to pour out in such a profound way, what does that mean for us? Are we ready? What would it even look like to live in the fullness of that power?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
To answer those questions, we need to look at some of the most incredible moments in history, moments when the Holy Spirit moved in ways that no one could predict. Think of the Great Awakening, where entire cities were transformed overnight. Or the Azusa Street Revival, where people of all races and backgrounds came together, united by the power of the Spirit, and miracles happened daily. But here's the thing, those weren't just isolated events. They were previews of what's coming. Imagine that power, but on a global scale. Imagine every believer walking in boldness, every church overflowing with love and miracles, every corner of the earth touched by God's presence. That's the promise of the latter rain. And here's a deep question for you: if we know this is coming, why do so many of us live like it's not? Why do we settle for a faith that feels safe, comfortable, even powerless? What would happen if we truly believed that the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead lives in us? Okay, this is just the beginning. In part 2, we're going to dig into the signs that the latter rain is already starting to fall and what it means for you and me. So don't go anywhere, you don't want to miss what's next. Welcome back. So we've talked about the promise of the latter rain and the incredible power of the Holy Spirit that's about to pour out. But here's where things get real. The signs are already here. The floodgates are opening. And the question isn't if it's coming, it's are you ready for it? Let's start with the signs. All around the world, we're seeing movements of God that are impossible to explain in human terms. People in remote villages are having dreams and visions of Jesus. Miracles are happening in places where the gospel has been suppressed for centuries. Entire communities are being transformed by the power of prayer and worship. One of the most incredible examples is the underground church in places like China and the Middle East. Despite intense persecution, these believers are experiencing explosive growth, and it's not because of fancy buildings or programs. It's because the Holy Spirit is moving. People are being healed, lives are being changed, and the gospel is spreading like wildfire. But here's the thing, these aren't just isolated events. They're the early drops of the latter rain. They're proof that God is on the move, and His Spirit is breaking through even in the darkest places. Now let's bring it closer to home. What about you? What about your church, your community, your life? Are you seeing the evidence of the Spirit's power, or does it feel like something's missing? Here's a hard truth: the latter rain isn't going to pour out on people who are just sitting back waiting for it. It's going to pour out on those who are hungry, those who are seeking, those who are saying, "God, I want more. I need more." So, let me ask you, are you hungry? When was the last time you prayed, not just for your needs, but for a fresh outpouring of the Holy Spirit? When was the last time you stepped out in faith, trusting that God would show up in a big way? You see, the latter rain isn't just about signs and wonders, it's about transformation. It's about becoming the kind of person God can use to bring His kingdom to earth. And that starts with surrender. It starts with saying, "God, whatever it takes, I'm all in." But let's be honest, surrender isn't easy. It means letting go of control, letting go of comfort, and stepping into the unknown. And that's scary. But here's the good news: when you surrender, you're not stepping into emptiness. You're stepping into the arms of a God who loves you more than you can imagine and who has incredible plans for your life. So what would it look like if you fully surrendered to the Holy Spirit? What could God do through you if you stopped holding back? These are questions only you can answer, but they're questions worth wrestling with. All right, we're building towards something huge here. In part 3, we're going to talk about how to position yourself for the latter rain and what it means to live in the fullness of Holy Spirit power. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Okay, this is it, the moment we've been building toward. We've talked about the promise of the latter rain, the signs that it's already starting to fall, and the call to surrender. But now we're going to get practical. How do you position yourself for this outpouring? And what does it look like to live in the overflow of Holy Spirit power? First, let's talk about positioning. If you want to experience the fullness of the Spirit, you have to be in the right place spiritually, emotionally, and even physically. That starts with prayer. Not just a quick "God bless my day" kind of prayer, but deep, intentional, persistent prayer. The kind of prayer that says, "God, I won't let go until you bless me. I won't stop until I see your power in my life." Next, it's about community. The latter rain isn't going to pour out on lone rangers. It's going to pour out on people who are united, who are praying together, worshiping together, and stepping out in faith together. So ask yourself, are you connected to a community of believers who are hungry for more of God? If not, what's stopping you from finding one? Finally, it's about obedience. The Holy Spirit isn't going to pour out His power on people who aren't willing to use it. If you're praying for miracles but not willing to step out in faith, you're missing the point. The latter rain is about equipping the church to fulfill the Great Commission to go into all the world and make disciples. So, here's the challenge: what's one step of faith you can take this week? Maybe it's sharing your faith with a coworker. Maybe it's praying for someone who needs healing. Maybe it's simply spending more time in God's presence. Whatever it is, don't wait. Take the step. And as you do, remember this: the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. The same power that shook the early church is available to you. And the latter rain? It's not just a promise for the future. It's an invitation for today. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If this video inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, how are you preparing for the latter rain? Let's keep this conversation going and keep seeking the fullness of what God has for us. Thank you for staying with me on this incredible journey. There's so much more to unpack, so let's keep going deeper into the transformative power of the Holy Spirit and what the latter rain truly means for our lives, our communities, and the world. Let's take a moment and imagine what it would look like to live in the overflow of the Holy Spirit's power. I'm not just talking about having a good day spiritually. I'm talking about living in a state where God's presence is so tangible in your life that people can see and feel it just by being around you. Can you imagine that? But let's be real, sometimes this feels distant, doesn't it? Life gets busy. Faith can feel routine, even stagnant. So let me ask you something deeply personal. When was the last time you truly felt alive in your faith? I mean, not just going through the motions, but feeling like your heart was on fire for God. Here's the truth: living in the overflow isn't something that only happens to spiritual giants. It's not reserved for pastors, missionaries, or the super religious. It's for you, right where you are. And the key to stepping into that overflow, it's a partnership with the Holy Spirit. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, but I'm not holy enough. I'm not qualified. I don't have what it takes. And to that, I want to tell you something life-changing. The Holy Spirit doesn't choose perfect people. He chooses willing people. Look at the Bible. Peter denied Jesus 3 times and yet became one of the greatest leaders of the early church. Paul persecuted Christians, and God used him to spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. The Holy Spirit isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for surrender. Think about this for a second. What if the only thing standing between you and a life of Holy Spirit power is your own willingness to say yes to God? Saying yes to God isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. It might mean stepping out of your comfort zone. It might mean letting go of things that are holding you back: fear, doubt, pride, unforgiveness. But here's the incredible thing: when you take that step, the Spirit meets you there. One of my favorite stories is in Acts, where Peter and John heal a man who was lame from birth. This wasn't something they did in their own strength. It wasn't because they had special training or qualifications. It was because they were filled with the Holy Spirit and willing to step out in faith. Now, imagine if they hadn't. Imagine if they had let fear or doubt stop them. That man would have missed out on his miracle, and the people who witnessed it wouldn't have seen the power of God on display. So here's my question for you, who's waiting on the other side of your obedience, who could be impacted by the Holy Spirit working through you. When the Holy Spirit moves, it's never just about one person. It creates ripple effects that touch everyone around you. Think about the day of Pentecost. The Spirit didn't just empower the disciples, it sparked a movement that changed the world. And the same thing is true today. When you live in the overflow, it doesn't just transform your life, it impacts your family, your friends, your community, and even people you've never met. But let's pause here and get real again. If we truly believe that the latter rain is coming, that God's Spirit is about to pour out in ways we've never seen before. Are we living like it? Are we preparing our hearts, our lives, our churches for the harvest that's coming?